A lot of dedication to keep a congregation going for 50 years. We would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge some of the past presidents who are in attendance tonight. These people volunteered, or more often were voluntold, to step up and take a key leadership role. I know from experience that the presidency can be both rewarding and stressful at the same time. There isn't a president who hasn't worried that the ship could go down under his or her watch. In fact, that is the first bit of wisdom that esteemed former President Saul Hafner, who could not be here tonight, shared with me upon learning that I was about to be president many years ago. It was very nice of him to say that, and you can imagine. I am proud to have shared this distinction with Saul and other former presidents who are here tonight. Some of them, I'm going to mention them all. Fred Urey is here tonight. As a brand new member, I think it was around 1998, just walking into my first event, I held Fred in very high regard as the CEO of this impressive organization. Of course, the more I got to know about the organization, just kidding, Fred. Marilyn Brownstein is here. Marilyn could possibly be the most artistic of our presidents. Glad to see you, Marilyn. And Sam Brownstein, also, who could not be here tonight, also served as president. And we want to recognize that. Ellie Schaefer. Ellie is here tonight. What can I say about Ellie? She was the voice of reason as the president. When I got on the board as a very newbie treasurer, Ellie was the president. I remember being nervous, and she immediately put me at ease. So at ease that I've been on the board for 16 years in a row. Thanks a lot, Ellie. Joan Shaw is here tonight. Those of us who were on the board during Joan's presidency remember that Joan was a big fan of Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules of Order. In fact, rumor has it that Joan has been credited the most current edition of Robert's Rules for expert advice. Thank you, Joan, for running very, very organized and succinct board meetings. George Rockmore is here tonight. George is best known as the hippie president. It's a little known fact, and we're disclosing this tonight, that George added a line item to the budget during his term to outfit the board in tie-dye t-shirts. Jane Campbell, also here tonight. Jane Campbell was the High Society president. She ended each year with a champagne party. Very cool. Beth Ullman is here tonight. Oh, no. Steve Ullman. Steve was actually president. Glad you could make it, Steve. I see Carrie Shaw is here, too. Now, some of you don't know this, but Carrie Shaw is the Ben Franklin of the congregation. He's very inventive, he's got great ideas, and he happens to be the only president in the congregation who is never actually the president. Like Ben Franklin.
And And speaking of important people in our congregation, we'd like to invite up the lovely Rochelle Green, who is going to tell us about how our congregation got its start. Then we're going to hear some stories from other members of CHJ who will share their experiences. Rochelle?
Well, first I have to say I wasn't there at the time. We joined in the 90s, but a few years ago I had the opportunity to speak with Jean Franklin about how the congregation came to be. We didn't know each other well, but she called herself Mama Jean, and she was always happy to talk about how the congregation came to be. So we met at a Starbucks in Brooklyn, and she gave me the scoop. And then I was lucky enough to come across something that John Franklin had written also about how it came to be. So I'm going to start the way Jean started, which is in suburban Detroit, where they lived, John and Jean, and attended a temple that had been where John's father had been. It was a Reform temple, had been the rabbi for more than 40 years. And there was an assistant rabbi there named Rabbi Sherwin Wine, who everybody must be familiar with that name because he is a founder of the humanistic Judaism branch. He went to another congregation in Canada, but he was soon called back by a small group from this temple where he had been, and they were kind of separating themselves, and he asked him to begin a new congregation that would be more in keeping with their beliefs and their the way they would like to practice Judaism. And that became the Birmingham Temple, which we all know about, and it was the beginning of what would become humanistic Judaism, branch of Judaism. Now, a couple years after that, the Franklins were moving east, and Rabbi Sherwin asked them to begin a congregation in Westport, where they were moving to. But they didn't say yes so quickly because they thought they'd look around. So they came to Westport, and they kind of went temple shopping, as a lot of people do. And they weren't really finding what they wanted. And John actually kind of liked the Unitarian Church. But Jean said, no way. We have to make sure we help Judaism to continue, have a future. And so they decided, as John would write in the writing that I looked at, you'd be surprised what a couple of disenfranchised Jews will do to affirm their beliefs and keep peace in the family. So they went ahead and decided to form a branch. And because Jean had been very active in Hadassah and other women's organizations, they were able to kind of, I guess, as I said, beg and borrow the membership lists. They sent invitations out to hundreds of people and told them that they'd get to hear the atheist rabbi, as Sherwin Wine has been dubbed by a Time magazine article. And about 100 people came. They met in the Stop and Shop, in Westport, which at the time apparently had a very large restaurant area. And things started slowly, so 10 people joined. Another couple of months went by, Sherwin came back, talked again, another 10 people joined, and now they were rolling. And after they started to get organized, several more months, they had about more than 40 people, which was pretty good progress. It was still in 1967. But they were all on the board. And those of you who are on boards know how unreal that can be. So they started to, they needed to organize. And one of the things that they did was, one of their early decisions was figuring out what to call this group that they had. Some people wanted, so they got together one night. Some people wanted to call it a temple, and were pretty stern about that name. As others wanted to call it a fellowship, and apparently a long list of names appeared on the blackboard as they were fighting about it. And finally, at about 2:30 in the morning, one of them shouted out, "Congregation!" And everyone said, yes, that to them felt like it brought together that unifying factor of, how they all wanted to be part of what was going on and how they felt about one another. So in the first year, they started doing holiday services right away. The first service was, the sermons in the first year's services, one of them was a Greek Orthodox priest for whom English was a second language, and not all that good, and a Jewish psychiatrist. So kind of shaky start. But over the years, they kind of built up their repertoire. Jean actually was in charge of ceremonies and wrote a lot of the early services. And they started a Sunday school and the bar mitzvah program, and many of you remember Gert Albaum, who was the first mitzvah coordinator and became the mitzvah maven, and so on, until today, as we go forward into the future. So that's how it all started.
Thank you, Rochelle. And now we're going to have some brief stories by a few congregants, just telling their personal CHJ stories. And we're going to start with George Rockmore and Donna Soucy.
So as I look out and see all these past presidents, I'm struck with the thought that when we joined in 1994, I thought like Bob Ginsburg was like president for life. I mean, he was like the rabbi. It's like he'll be there forever, and it's Bob Ginsburg if you want anything. Little did I know that like 10 years later, I would be president. So, which I thought was. Boy, what a risky situation this is. And each president has their own style and way of doing things, as Dana was just alluding to. Like, for example, my predecessor, Joan, wonderful person, very, buttoned down, very, very, organized and everything. I'm more of a non-sequential, random kind of thinker. So she calls me up and she says, I'm gonna send you all the bylaws. So I get this huge tome, this 3-ring binder in the mail, which I immediately put in the closet where it sat for 2 years gathering dust until I moved it along to the next president. Because I thought, why not look at this thing? Anyway, so how we joined. This friend of mine who I'd been teaching with in New York, he was sort of a humorist, and he was doing these workshops on using humor as a stress management tool to corporations and to various groups on how to increase job production and stress reduction. So he gave me a call and he said, look, I'm coming down to Fairfield County and I need a place to crash. But I'm going to give this talk at this place called the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism. I said, say what? And he said, yeah. He said, why don't you come with me? And so I went. This is the Dietz's home, I believe. You know, with us. And we get there, and he starts, talking about humor and Jewish comics. And then he invites everybody in the congregation to stand up and tell a joke, And I'm thinking, I was like, this is great. This is so much better than prayers I don't understand. All these people having a great time. And I was really impressed. And there was no pressure on me to join or anything. I just kind of hung around and kibitzed a little bit. And I went home and I spoke to Donna, and we said, well, let's, give this a little further, exploration, and went to a few events, and we joined, and 26 years later, here we still are. There's so many things to remember about memorable moments. Trips to the city, the Tenement Museum, Ellis Island, the various sundry Seders, particularly the Tubishvach Seders, which was founded by Lucy Katz, the beloved Lucy Katz, and just a wonderful tradition that we started up here, and just really memorable. Not to mention the Sukkot celebrations and these wonderful Sukkots that were built to this day. But there was one particular evening that really has kind of stayed with me and resonated with me for many, many years. And that was on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, when 3 members of our congregation stood up at high holidays and spoke about their experiences leaving Ground Zero on that particular day. And it was so heartfelt and so human. And we were all so connected with it. I felt sort of like one with this entire congregation as they spoke of that experience of leaving Ground Zero on that day. And I felt like, this is what we're all about. Just really connecting on a really human level. And, and above everything else, all the other wonderful experiences, that particular experience of hearing those 3 people speak of that day has really stayed with me, and it's made me feel like this is what we're all about. And I have to say, Donna and I, speaking for myself, I don't think we could really live anywhere else because of the connections we've made and the family of friends that we've made over the years, and it's very important to us. And that's what I have to say.
I love that story about our friend Izzy leading us to the congregation, sort of like Moses bringing us to the promised land through humor. And certainly over the years there's been a lot of humor and some sort of sorrowful times too. But I was frankly kind of puzzled why I was asked to speak. I thought, oh, it's one of those things like where the nominating committee calls you and you think, oh no, they're going to ask me to do something. And so they finally settled on me, figuring, oh, she'll say yes. So here I am. And I have to say that thinking about it, like, why me? All of a sudden I was struck and I said to myself, well, I'm a historical figure in this congregation. I am the first, and I hope and I know I will not be the last, but I am the first person to ever be adopted by this congregation, which I am very proud of. And it didn't happen right away. We were members for maybe, I don't know, 10 years or so before somebody, and I think that somebody was Bob Ginsburg in Maryland, where are you? Maryland, out there somewhere, who approached me about it. And I had, at that time, I had been teaching in the Sunday school. And I started out when we first joined, the first year was, I spent the first year terrified I would be asked to do something. Because we're a volunteer organization, right? So I'm thinking, oh, please don't ask, I don't know how. But the nominating committee kind of left me alone for a year, figuring let them sort of ease in. And then I got asked to join a try. and which also terrified me. But I was with other people. I remember Stephanie Browner, those of you who remember Stephanie, helping me along, and we did it. We did 3 months of programming, and when it was all over, I was so glad that I had done it, and I was proud of myself, and I thought, gee, I even kind of enjoyed it. So when I was asked to teach in the Sunday school, I thought, again, I'm terrified. What do I know about Judaism or humanistic Judaism? But I did it, and I figured I'd just have to stay one class ahead of the kids in terms of knowledge, which somehow I did. And so when I was asked, I really thought, well, why do I want to join? I mean, Sherwood Wine said all you had to do to be a Jew, a humanistic Jew, was to identify with the history and the culture and the tradition of the Jewish people, and that made you a Jew. And I said, well, I've been teaching this Sunday school. I even got all the way up eventually to the mitzvah class. So aren't I, why do I need to have an adoption ceremony, which was kind of weird too, because I'm I'm an adoptive mother, I adopt my daughter. Anyway, so I thought that's so weird. So the whole thing was churning around in my head, and then it sort of hit me, you know, when people ask me, are you Jewish? I would say, well, I'd go through this sort of awkward sort of thing. I would say, well, I was born to Catholic parents, but you know, by the age of 7, I just, you know, I didn't believe any of this stuff. And but now I'm a member of the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism. And I would leave it at that. And I got to feeling, you know, that's kind of a cop-out. I'm teaching these young children in our Sunday school that humanistic Judaism is all about the important things in life that you learn from knowing the history of the Jewish people, and that there is real value there and real importance. The rituals, when we talk about Shabbat, we make our little Shabbat candle holders. Why are we doing that? When we have the Sukkot and we build the Sukkah, why are we doing that? These are things that have gone on for thousands of years, and there's an importance and value to that you belong not just to mommy and daddy and your family there and grandpa and all that, you belong to a much larger Jewish family. And this is what we do. This is how we stay connected through these rituals and these values and the history that can teach you how to survive some really tough times. This is what it's all about. And then if I was teaching them how to be humanistic Jews, then I was a fraud and I had to be one. So I said yes to Bob and to Marilyn, and I think Eileen was there too. And I said, yes, I'll do it. And I have to say, again, it was the most terrifying but moving experience of my life. I've never felt so loved by a group of people in my life, people who I had been sharing the wonderful experience of being part of this congregation for 10 years came up to me. And we were all, it was just a big love fest. So, but I felt finally I was able to say, when people said, so are you Jewish? You know, if this question comes up, I'm sure everybody gets this question. I said, yeah, I'm a humanistic Jew. And I have to share with you, recently I went even further than that. I had an experience that was kind of really a revelation to me. I was sitting at the Trumbull Library where I work. I was on a break. I was reading the Times, as I always do, on my break. And right next to me at a table was a student with her tutor. She was writing a paper. And at one point, her tutor said to her, so how's it going? And she said, really well, but I'm not sure about this last sentence. And so the tutor said, oh, what is it? She said, something, something, and then the Jews knew it was all over. She was writing about Kristallnacht, I'm pretty sure. And the tutor said to her, oh, well, why don't you change it to Jewish people? And you know that sensitivity about being called, saying you're Jewish or you're a Jew. And I looked up from the newspaper and I said, this was totally spontaneous. I just said, I'm a Jew and that's all right. Keep it. And I realized I identify totally now as a Jew and a humanistic Jew. And I don't care what anybody else says.